Most of us have an idea of what constitutes breastfeeding. You think of it differently. How do you define breastfeeding?
Well, I'm advocating for broadening the definition, and that's because breastfeeding has become the standard for Americans. They expect that that's what good parenting looks like, and it's not always so simple to breastfeed. And I can give you an example. Someone who has an aversion to having her breast touched because of sexual trauma in her past, pumps her milk, feeds that milk to her baby, and calls it breastfeeding. Other people will nurse their babies and the infant will be suckling at the breast, but there's no milk. And this happens for everyone before the milk comes in. And some people allow their babies to comfort nurse, as it's called, and they call that breastfeeding. So I'm inclined to go with their definitions. I don't know that the distinction between breastfeeding and exceptional breastfeeding can ever be really clear, because all breastfeeding feels exceptional some of the time. It's not conforming to idealized images of it. And the more surprising practices that I talk about in the book are really more common than most people realize. So for this project, it started with my own curiosity as a sociologist of how people experience breastfeeding when they fall outside the idealized norm. So for myself, I was breastfeeding my adopted child. I induced lactation. So I started looking for other people that fell outside that norm. And I called it non-normative breastfeeding. And then I later reframed it positively as exceptional breastfeeding. But I got an enormous response from people who self-identified as exceptional breastfeeders. I got tandem nursing moms, transgender breastfeeders, long-term breastfeeders who were breastfeeding their children as old as 7, and lots of people who were sharing their extra pumped milk. And so what I realized is what people might think is really weird or non-normative or exceptional is actually pretty common.
Where would you like to see the conversation around breastfeeding go? What sorts of discussions would you like to see others' milk ultimately help generate?
Well, I would say 4 main takeaways. And the first one is philosophical, but it has real-world implications. And the rest are just about what exceptional breastfeeders can teach us. So my first point's simple: believe breastfeeders. If they indicate that nursing an infant at the breast with formula that they have in a bag that's run through a tube to the nipple is breastfeeding, then we have to be open to that perspective. Otherwise, researchers and medical service providers are missing parts of the real infant nurturing experience. Second, exceptional breastfeeders show us a way to end the mommy wars, where every parenting choice is cause for criticism and cause for blame. Milk sharing, for instance, creates strange bedfellows across the political spectrum, across class spectrum, and they get hesitant to encourage regulation of their milk sharing, because once medical authorities get involved, lawmakers get involved, profit makers get involved, that definition is going to narrow again. And because exceptional breastfeeders have difficult personal histories with authorities already because of their breastfeeding decisions, then I think it makes them more open to and less judgmental of others' choices that fall outside the norm. Third, in broadening what breastfeeding looks like, exceptional breastfeeders save us from what I think is a too common refrain, and that is, if I fail at breastfeeding, I've failed as a woman. One case in point, butch lesbians and transgender men who are breastfeeding, they don't use breastfeeding as a way to feel like real women. So they're showing us a way to separate those two ideas. And then fourth, breastfeeders don't have to be so isolated in their infant care. A model of equal parenting is lesbians living together and sharing the nursing duties for their child. They're both breastfeeding. Not everybody can have that kind of ideal situation, but even dropping off a cooler or picking up a cooler of someone's pumped milk, or sharing a breastfeed in an ad hoc way, like one woman was painting a wall and her baby was crying, so her friend picked up the baby and nursed it and thought nothing of it. Those kinds of things show us the mundane ways that exceptions have the potential to be pretty unexceptional, and I think that's liberating.
You've been listening to a conversation with Kristin Wilson about her new book, Others Milk: The Potential of Exceptional Breastfeeding.